Hi there. My name is Nick Knowlton, and I'm a graduate of the 1903-1904 CHDS Master's program. In this presentation, I'll discuss my thesis project that explains how electoral participation can facilitate the integration of new citizens. Immigration is a long-standing issue of debate in American politics. The 2020 U.S. election was no exception. Among the points of debate within immigration, a frequently encountered question concerned whether arriving immigrants would succeed in integrating and becoming part of their host communities. Integration is a fascinating area of study as it concerns matters of identity formation and reconstruction within a new community. Sometimes conflated with assimilation, integration and assimilation broadly refer to the same phenomenon, distinguishing themselves generally by the degree to which a newcomer retains portions of their identity with their host community. While a contested concept, assimilation has been previously criticized for being associated with compelling immigrants to shed their cultural identities. In this project, however, I use the term integration to emphasize an approach where new citizens and immigrants generally retain their cultural identity through intersubjective exchanges with the host country's social mainstream. In my own research concerning assimilation and integration, I was intrigued by prior research highlighting integration as an issue for homeland security, as well as other research suggesting an association between voting and integration. That is, that increased rates of integration were associated with increased tendencies to turn out to vote in elections. This relationship had yet to be explained, however, including whether one factor was causing the other. That is, was one's integration causing them to vote more frequently, or was voting instead causing someone to be further integrated? Consequently, my research question sought to explain this relationship between voting, that is, participating in elections, and integration into American society, including whether electoral participation could affect rates of integration. After determining my research question, the next challenge concerned research design. Based on my question, accessibility of data, and availability of resources, I elected to use nested analysis as a research design. In short, nested analysis is a mixed method research design that combines a large N analysis with a small n analysis, where n refers to the size of the sample being studied. What makes this approach nested is how the small n analysis is used in the particular design. Where findings from the large n analysis support the baseline hypothesis or the underlying theory, the small n analysis proceeds in what's called model testing, basically subjecting the theory to further scrutiny. However, in cases where the findings of the large n analysis do not support the baseline hypothesis, the small n analysis proceeds instead through model building, basically diagnosing what went wrong with the baseline theory and identifying any ways to revise or improve the baseline theory for further investigation and testing. For my baseline model, I proposed a theory of integration through elections. In many ways, this theory built upon prior research concerning democracy and elections, in particular, one strand that looked at democracy by elections. In this strand of research, democracy by elections argued that elections could be a causal force for democracy, particularly through its socialization effects. That is, that elections could socialize citizens to democratic and civic norms, thus building democracy over time in non-democratic settings. Taking these findings, I sought to leverage them in an integration setting to see whether similar socialization effects could apply in an integration setting. That is, could elections socialize new citizens to democratic and civic norms as they are practiced in a democratic society? What this means in practice is having political campaigns and political parties engage in intersubjective exchanges with new and integrating citizens by means of recruiting new voters to their campaigns and seeking accommodation where interests may align or overlap. In testing these findings, I engaged in descriptive statistics of U.S. Census Bureau data. While not as dispositive as other types of analyses, the results of my large N analysis were sufficient for assessing whether there existed a relationship between voting and integration, as observed by proxy variables including household income, education, and years in the United States. In more technical terms, the results of the large N analysis failed to reject the null hypothesis, which basically posited no relationship between voting and integration. In this study, we can see how voting is associated with measures of integration. With respect to household income, the relationship manifests itself at incomes above $50,000. For education, we also see how voting becomes positively associated with education, particularly above the secondary school or its equivalent. This relationship also holds true for the number of years of residence in the United States, as individuals arriving prior to 2000 demonstrate an increased tendency to vote than their counterparts arriving after 2000. As the results of my large analysis generally supported the baseline theory of integration through elections, my research proceeded by a model testing small n analysis. In this part, I selected a case study of Minneapolis's Somali community as an influential case of integration through electoral participation. Following Gehring's approach to case selection, Minneapolis's Somali community serves as an influential case given its potential to cast doubt on this project's theory by means of the community being relatively new, that is, it was established in the 1990s, that this community comprises an ethnic and religious minority in the United States, and has received prior negative attention as recently as even 2020 due to unfounded allegations that it contained links to Homeland Security threats. In other words, I selected Minneapolis' Somali community given the distinct and substantive challenges the community generally faces relative to other immigrant communities in the United States. The findings from my small n analysis, in short, show a significant event occurring in 2006, where you had a candidate for the U.S. House of Representatives that specifically targeted this community for political recruitment for their campaign. In 2006, we see a marked increase in turnout in primary elections from the Minneapolis Somali community. This increased turnout generally sustains itself after 2006, generally staying above levels prior to 2006, also increasing again in 2018 when you have another candidate for the U.S. House of Representatives that actually becomes the first Somali member of the House of Representatives. In short, what the small n analysis shows is that this political activation of the Somali community in 2006 provided spillover benefits and dividends, not just in the community becoming a rather influential voting bloc in Minneapolis and Minnesota. However, this community also showed marked increases in its rates of integration. Now, to be sure, the Somali community still has progress to go with respect to demonstrating parity with other established and arguably integrated communities. However, the results of the small n analysis show that by activating this community in 2006, the Somali community's rates of integration increase in a fashion greater than if they had not been activated previously. In conclusion, these findings provide limited support that electoral participation can facilitate integration in certain settings. These results are commensurate with what would be expected from what's called a hoop test, where much like jumping through a hoop or jumping over hurdles, the results lend support to this hypothesis or this theory while still holding short of outright confirmation. Additional research is required. This could include further longitudinal analyses using more sophisticated statistical techniques. Further research could also look at disentangling endogeneity, that is, further distinguishing whether voting is in fact causing integration to increase, or alternatively, if rates of integration are causing others to vote more frequently. The implications of these findings are multiple. With respect to policy, we can see how rates of integration may be correlated with political activation. Certain policies that would be very non-interventionist could look at incorporating voter education into naturalization curriculum, as one example. However, there's other implications for Homeland Security. Implications include building resilient communities, particularly in times of distress or crisis. This includes inculcating national ties, as well as preventing radicalization and disaffection of new immigrant communities, advancing socioeconomic development of new communities, of new citizens and their communities, including preventing the creation of permanent underclasses of new citizens, as well as having spillover effects in strengthening U.S. democracy. As one final takeaway, this project shows that students can engage in important research and obtain significant findings for Homeland Security despite limited resources and research budgets. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation. I would certainly encourage you all to read my thesis when you have an opportunity. Thank you very much.